On June 6th of 2014, Sarah kissed her little girl goodnight, excited for a rare evening of freedom. She laughed, she danced, she lived in the moment, but she never returned home. The next morning, silence. No calls, no texts, no trace of Sarah. And soon, what began as a missing person case unraveled into one of the most haunting murder investigations that Long Island had ever seen. An abandoned car, a community on edge, and a dangerous man lurking in the shadows. Tonight, we dive deep into the tragic case of Sarah Goode, a young mother whose story became a fight for justice, a devastating loss for her family, and a chilling true crime case that continues to shock to this day. Welcome to True Crime Stories. If this is your first time here, I'm your host, Ty Knotts, and I post new true crime documentaries every single week. We try to keep things simple here. No AI narrations, no gore, just classic true crime. So if you're into that sort of thing, consider subscribing. It's totally free and just lets you know when I post new cases. Sarah Patricia Goode was a single mom of a 4-year-old girl named Jocelyn at the time of the case. According to her friends and family, Sarah was a wonderful young woman. She was responsible, she was very loving, and she had a big heart. She was born to be a mom, and she had that very protective motherly instinct in her. And when she found out she was pregnant, she was overjoyed. Even though we don't know who the baby's father is or how Sarah got to be a single mom, she vowed that she would work hard to protect her little one. Sarah was working as a medical technician in Medford, Long Island at the time of the case, and she was living her life in between working and taking care of her little girl. On the fateful day of June 6th, 2014, Sarah actually had plans. She was invited to a party by her friends, and it was safe to say she was excited. See, Sarah was 21. She was a single mom, and on top of that, she was working all the time. So she had a pretty packed schedule most of the time. Now, don't get me wrong, Sarah loved the way that things were, but she also wasn't against having a little breather in between and blowing off some steam. So this get-together was supposed to be an amazing way to just get her mind off of things and relax. So Sarah got her brother-in-law to take care of her baby. She got done with her shift at work, and then she came back home, settled everything for the night, got dressed, hugged and kissed Jocelyn, and went out the door. But tragically, Sarah would never come home. And little did her baby know that her mom had just hugged her and smothered her in kisses for one final time before she'd walk out that door, never to be seen again. So Sarah went out to the party, and everything went without a hitch. They all had a great time, and that was pretty much that. There are even pictures from the party that can be found online, and looking back, it's just haunting to think that Sarah was alive and well when these pictures were taken. Everyone was happy, and no one knew what was about to unfold. The next day, Sarah's mom called her, but she wasn't picking up her phone. Then Sarah's mom waited for her to come home to visit her family, but that also didn't happen. Her mom didn't think much of it at the time. I mean, she knew that her daughter was out late at night, so she was probably just in bed sleeping. Besides, Sarah's nephew's birthday was about to take place, so her mom thought that she would at least make it to that for sure. But that wouldn't be the case. And this birthday was the exact moment when everyone in Sarah's family thought that something was very wrong. Now, Sarah had never missed her nephew's birthday, like ever. And I know that life happens sometimes and maybe you just can't make it, but what was so odd for Sarah's family was the fact that she hadn't reached out either. If you remember, Sarah's mom called and texted her, and I'm sure other people did too. So Sarah should have gotten back to them when she could so as not to make them worry, right? But there was nothing. Sarah was silent. She wasn't picking up her phone, she wasn't replying to any of her texts. No one had seen her since the evening of the party, and she didn't make it to her nephew's birthday party either. But also, Sarah had a little girl to take care of, so where could she have gone leaving her baby behind? All sorts of thoughts were going through Sarah's loved ones' minds, and that was when the police were contacted, and 21-year-old Sarah was reported missing. Her family stressed to the police that this was very unlike Sarah, and the police were on high alert too because, again, Sarah was a single mom. She couldn't have just dropped everything on a random evening and decided to get away from it all and live a different life. She had to come back for her little girl. But next, she wouldn't show up for work. And this was also extremely alarming. And the police put their money on the night of the party, obviously. It was the last time that anyone had seen her. They thought that this was the last place where Sarah was before she went missing, so it was only fitting that they start from there. But how could a relatively simple get-together have ended up with a missing person, and a missing mother at that? Well, detectives were about to find out, and the case was about to take a turn that they never expected. The investigators, as well as the community, held searches for Sarah. Sarah and her car were both missing, and the police needed to find one way or the other to get some answers and finally get to the bottom of the case. The police held searches near the party, her home, and in other neighboring areas. They also talked to several people, including Sarah's friends and people from the party, to figure out what might have happened to her or if she'd reached out to anyone during that time. 2 days into the search, on June 8th, a gray 1999 BMW 328i was found about a mile or so away from Sarah's home in the Medford area. This was for sure Sarah's car. The police were immediately called to the scene, and from the looks of it, the car was abandoned. There was no sign of Sarah in the car or anywhere around it. The police sent out a team of searchers to search the surrounding area, while some of the officers examined the car from the inside and out. When the officers opened the car, it was a mess, and let's just say things did not look good in the car. The entire inside of the car just about was stained red. Just by taking one look at the interior of the car, it was clear to the police that something vicious had happened inside this vehicle. And there was a significant amount of DNA in the car, along with the red-stained handprint that they found on the hood. There were also plugs of hair dangling from the car window. This was really bad. Suddenly, the police had this very sinking feeling. They knew that if they didn't find Sarah soon, the chances of finding her alive would be pretty slim. The search for Sarah carried on while the car was being swabbed for DNA. In 6 days following Sarah's disappearance, a group of volunteers were searching a wooded area that was about a half mile or so away from where Sarah's car was found. One of the volunteers, David Zorns, later said that as soon as he walked into the woods with that team of people, he just knew that something was wrong. The air was thick with a deathly odor, and as soon as they came across some police officers, they were escorted right back out of the woods, and for good reason too. Because in those woods, they had just stumbled upon a body. It was a young woman who was obviously deceased, and from one look, it was obvious that she'd been viciously attacked. If that wasn't bad enough, she'd also been taken advantage of. There were multiple wounds on her body, and the police noticed a flower tattoo on the woman's foot. Now, I'm not sure that I mentioned this before, but Sarah also had a flower tattoo on her foot. It was clearly mentioned on her missing person poster. The police were dreading this discovery, but unfortunately, the woman in the woods soon was identified as 21-year-old Sarah Goode. Sarah had gone out for a night out with her friends for the first time in a long time. She was out having a fun time with her gang, and now she was murdered in the woods. No one could have ever expected this. Sarah's family, they were devastated by this tragic news. Sarah had left her little girl behind, and now she was gone forever. The community was shocked to the core, but who could have done this to Sarah? What could have happened that led to this brutal attack? Well, that was exactly what the police had to figure out, and they would soon reveal that they had their sights set on someone all along. So when the police were talking to various people who knew Sarah, some of them were the ones who attended the party Sarah went to, and they had something interesting to tell the police. See, at that party, Sarah was approached by a man, and he kept asking her out. The police pressed for more information, like who was this man? Well, the man was 19-year-old Dante Taylor. Dante was an ex-Marine. He'd served in the Marines for 7 months before he was discharged, and people who knew both Dante and Sarah told the police that Dante was a troubled man. Not much else is known about Dante, though, aside from just a few things. We know that he was married before, and the two went through a very hard breakup. Dante took that breakup to heart, and his friends said that ever since then, he had very dark thoughts about ending his own life. It was also reported that Dante was subjected to abuse when he was in his teens. Now, we don't know any more details about this incident, but it's unfortunate nonetheless. What we do know is that due to this very incident in his teens, Dante was very mentally disturbed. But all this aside, he was seen by multiple people at the same party that Sarah attended. And it was reported that Dante tried to romantically approach Sarah as the party was coming to an end. Now, Sarah was not looking for anything serious, or anything at all for that matter. She just wanted a night out with her friends, and meeting and speaking with the guy was the furthest thing from her mind. So naturally, she rejected Dante's advances. But Dante just wouldn't let up. He saw a beautiful young woman that he wanted, so he just kept going for it. But he was getting turned down left, right, and center. Sarah just wasn't having it. Even though people at the party didn't know what actually happened after the fact, this was all beginning to make sense to the police. A man who was rejected and couldn't take it well, there was definitely something fishy about this whole situation. So the police wanted to have a little chat with Dante himself, and he was pretty easy to get a hold of, and he was brought in for questioning about the night of the party. But now, this is where the police made a really big mistake that honestly didn't sit well with anyone. See, when the police detained Dante a few days following Sarah's murder, they had taken his DNA and associated evidence when they hadn't even read him his Miranda rights. And all of this was done without any probable cause. This was a really big blunder, and the police were called out for this. Guilty or not, suspicious or just looking at a person of interest, the police should follow procedure at all times. It just looked like the police were moving far too fast with the investigation, and they just wanted to pin the crime on the first person that seemed suspicious and call it a day. Well, as a result of this, Dante's initial arrest was voided, and he was actually free to go. But what Dante did next was really bizarre. Dante, after getting released, booked a flight from New York down to Florida, and it was reported that his mom actually sent him there and told him to wait until it was, quote, safe to come back. Later, Dante's attorney came forward and stressed that Dante went to Florida to visit family and that he apparently wasn't running away from the cops. But if he wasn't running away, this is awfully weird timing, and it's just strange and really didn't paint him in a good light. But meanwhile, the palm prints found in the car, as well as the other DNA evidence, were tested against Dante's, and the police were waiting on those results. And when they came out, the DNA found in that car matched Dante's. Dante literally had no reason to have been in Sarah's car, especially after she'd rejected his advances, and now his DNA and palm prints were found in that car, which was now in a very grisly state. So the police theorized from these findings that Dante had followed Sarah all the way to her car and tried to persuade her again. When she rejected him yet again, this was when Dante launched into a vicious attack on Sarah inside the car, or just outside of it, we don't know, and he took her life. But speaking of that attack on Sarah, her autopsy results had now come back, and they revealed, some very disturbing details. Sarah had sustained over 40 wounds on her body, including her head. And what was so haunting was that the attack had so much anger and brute force behind it that part of the weapon was found still lodged inside her. If someone attacked Sarah with enough anger, enough power to break a metal weapon like that, it definitely didn't look like a random attack. This was a crime of passion, of rage. The police also checked cell phone data and location data, and they primarily checked where Dante was at the estimated time of Sarah's attack. And sure enough, his phone location placed him within the radius of where the crime took place, where Sarah's car was found, as well as where Sarah's body was found by volunteer workers. So things were finally starting to fall into place. Sure, the police stumbled in the beginning, and they got a lot of public backlash for it. But finally, they were able to prove that Dante was at the crime scene, and he was the one who subsequently attacked and murdered Sarah. And so they wanted to get Dante in handcuffs and make him stand in court to face the consequences of what he had done to Sarah. But by that time, he had already left Florida, and the police had to fight against the clock to get their hands on the guy. They alerted all of the law enforcement in Florida to keep a lookout for Dante, and his arrest warrant was issued too. And ultimately, Dante was arrested in Vero Beach, Florida. And interestingly, he was arrested on a completely different charge. It was unrelated to Sarah's murder, but we don't really know what it was. But since the Florida police knew of Dante and the arrest warrant out for him, he was detained and then sent back to New York to face the music. And investigators and Sarah's family were waiting with bated breath to see if the man would actually have to face the consequences of his actions. But thankfully, they didn't have to wait long. Dante was eventually charged with the murder of Sarah Goode, and he pleaded not guilty, so he was awaiting trial. During the trial, the state presented heaps of evidence against Dante, including the DNA evidence, the phone location, and the palm print on Sarah's car. The prosecution tried its best to piece together what had happened to Sarah on the evening of that party. It's believed that Sarah and Dante knew each other before the party. Actually, Dante and Sarah lived pretty close together, and they were friendly. They'd cross paths from time to time, and things were just pretty casual between them. But at the party on June 6th, Dante wanted more from Sarah, and a lot more. Sarah, who was not interested, rejected Dante at the party, leaving him angry and dejected. And it's believed that later that night he got a hold of the murder weapon, and then, as Sarah neared her car ready to go home, he charged towards her. She was likely completely unaware of what was happening when he began the attack, but this isn't known for sure. But after getting what he wanted from her, he then finished the assault, and thus, her life. After the horrific deed was done, prosecutors believed that Dante dumped her body in the nearby woods and then abandoned her car just a mile away from her home. Then he went on his merry way as if he didn't just murder a woman for telling him no. I hate to simplify things like this, but in essence, that's exactly what happened. Sarah, by all accounts, lost her life because she turned Dante down. But what is truly tragic is that this is apparently just Dante's MO. Because when the prosecution was putting this case together, they found out that in 2011, Dante had attempted to do the exact same thing to another woman who tried to turn him down, but luckily she made it out alive. It's unbelievable. Dante has tried to terrorize a woman before, that too at knife point, and this time he did it again, but he didn't hold back. I really hope that the woman who was a victim of Dante's in 2011 is doing okay, because this type of thing, it's not supposed to happen. People aren't supposed to see this level of trauma. We're not built for it. But on the other hand, the defense came forward with their own argument, and their main point was the blunders made by the police and the prosecution before and following Dante's arrest. The defense first argued the whole Miranda rights situation, and then went on to say that what Dante did to Sarah was somehow consensual. Essentially, they were quite literally just blowing smoke and trying to get Dante off on a technicality. Everything they said, every trick they tried to pull, it was all a lie, or some weirdly spun version of the truth. They knew Dante was guilty. They were just grasping at straws to try to get their proper payday, and it was gross. But they did bring up one good point. Sort of. I mean, Dante's DNA was all over Sarah's car, so it seems clear as day he committed the crime. We basically know that for certain. But they did bring up some interesting information. See, Sarah and her ex-boyfriend, who she dated for about 2 years, DJ Waters, had a conflict over their breakup. We're not sure what it was, but a few days before Sarah's murder, she'd posted several cryptic tweets about being threatened. The tweet on June 1st read, quote, "So you know I live on a dead end. I see you creeping." Then on June 4th, Sarah posted the tweet saying, "Getting threatened for days now. Is that the new thing to do?" Although it's not clear who Sarah was talking about, it was alleged that this had something to do with her ex-boyfriend, DJ, and his mom. Following these tweets, someone anonymously tipped that Sarah received several threatening voicemails from DJ and his mom. And Sarah did report this incident to the police, though. So the defense stressed that the prosecution didn't check other suspects in the case, and they were deliberately only after Dante. But again, the reason that they were going after Dante was because his DNA was found all over her car and all over her body. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to see Dante was there at the moment Sarah lost her life, not DJ. There was no one else who would have attacked Sarah. Did the boyfriend threaten her? Sure, maybe, probably, but he wasn't there. But with all of these arguments, it was time for the verdict. As the trial reached its end, Dante was given a chance to speak, but he said nothing. Ultimately, Dante Taylor was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. At the sentencing, Dante seemed relaxed and was caught cracking a smile on multiple occasions. This man was not ashamed of what he was done. He also didn't turn any corners in prison either, because he was reprimanded and punished multiple times in prison for drugs and misconduct. According to a doctor at the infirmary, Dante claimed that he was also still having really dark thoughts. He was placed under a watchful eye in a separate unit, but he was then transferred to his original cell less than a day after these claims, according to his family. It was also reported that Dante was treated very badly in prison. A photo of Dante in prison surfaced sometime later, and he was beaten up pretty bad. Dante's family alleged that it was the doing of the correctional officers, but this was never proven. This was the lead up to the night of October 7th of 2017. On that fateful night, prison guards found 22-year-old Dante Taylor lifeless in a cell. He couldn't be revived, and he was pronounced dead at the scene. He'd only served 1 year of his sentence for murdering Sarah. Sarah's family was devastated at the news. The monster who took Sarah's life finally took the easy way out. They wanted to see Sarah's murderer ponder over his actions for the rest of his life, but now that wasn't possible. But rest assured, while Dante didn't get his proper punishment in this life, he will certainly get what he's owed in the next. Evil will never go unpunished. But on the other side of things, Dante's mom, Darlene, filed a federal civil rights lawsuit against the administrators, the nurses, the doctors, and correctional officers at the prison in which her son was found lifeless. Dante's family argued that the prison guards didn't provide him with proper medical care, nor did they prevent an impending attack on Dante. But we really don't know if this lawsuit led to any changes or any restitution or not. There have been no further updates after the lawsuit was filed back in 2020. This case was extremely tragic to the very end. First, Sarah lost her life so suddenly and needlessly. She left behind her little girl, who now has to grow up without either of her parents. And this just breaks my heart to hear. Kids should never have to go through this ever. It's their job to play, have fun, and make mistakes, not to grow up without their parents and eventually find out that one of them was murdered and the other just walked out of their life. This is the sort of stuff that follows you throughout your whole life. And because of one single man and his inability to take no for an answer, so many lives are ruined. So many innocent people were just left broken. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to another episode of True Crime Stories. If you're new here and you like the video, be sure to hit that like button and consider subscribing. It's completely free. It just lets you know when I post new videos. And if you love the channel and want to help support us, consider hitting that join button below the video and become a member of the channel. It allows you to see new videos sometimes days or weeks before they're posted to the public. And speaking of which, I wanted to give a shout out to some new channel members this week, including Michelle Alvizio, Isabel Deck, Expat in Waiting, Franica C, and Alicia Turner. And don't forget, you can grab True Crime Stories t-shirts by clicking the link below the video, including our most recent It's Never a Mannequin tee. But with that, my name is Ty Knotts. I thank you guys again for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.